Hi, everyone. Welcome back to U.S. History with Lennox. And if you're one of my students, this is one of those rare moments in Texas where a snow day means we're short on time. So you are going to be responsible for the content in this video as we finish up the 1890s and the populist movement. And if you're just joining us for the heck of it, well, welcome. This video is going to focus on the Populist Party in the 1890s, especially the economic issues and elections that define the decade. A big part of this story centers on bimetallism, the idea that U.S. currency should be backed both by gold and silver. Expanding the money supply would create inflation, which sounds negative, but for farmers, it actually mattered because they relied heavily on loans. And under the gold standard, prices stayed low while debt stayed high. Inflation would also raise crop prices for them and allow them to repay their loans with cheaper dollars. We'll talk a little bit more about that here in just a little bit. So in this video, we're going to finish the story of the Populist Party by focusing on three things that defined the 1890s. Number one, the debate over money, that whole bimetallism question. Number two, the elections of 1892 and 96. And finally, why populism ultimately disappears by the end of the decade, even though its ideas don't. At the heart of populism was this fight over money. See, during the late 1800s, the United States was on the gold standard, meaning the money supply was limited to the amount of gold that the government had. For bankers and industrialists, this system worked great. It kept inflation low, it protected the value of loans, and favored people who already had wealth. But for farmers, the gold standard was devastating. Farmers depended on loans to plant their crops, to buy equipment, and to survive bad seasons. When prices stayed low and the dollar stayed strong, their debts became harder and harder to pay. That's why the populists argued for bimetallism. It's also known as free silver. And again, bimetallism meant backing U.S. currency with gold and silver, which would increase the money supply. And more money in circulation creates inflation. That raises the crop prices and again allows the farmer to repay his debts with cheaper dollars. This is why you're often going to see this issue summarized simply as the farmers supported free silver and the bankers and the businesses opposed it. You know, the debate over money dominated American politics throughout the 1890s, and the Populist Party officially entered the national politics in the election of 1892. They met in Omaha, Nebraska, and they wrote what was called the Omaha Platform, which called for free silver, a graduated income tax, direct election of senators, and government ownership of railroads and federal loans to farmers. They selected James B. Weaver as their candidate for president. Now, spoiler alert, Weaver doesn't win, but the result is significant. See, the populists did win over 1 million votes. They carried several Western states, and they elected governors, senators, and members of Congress. This election proved that populism is not a fringe movement. It's a real political force, and it put pressure on both the Republicans and the Democrats to address the concerns of farmers and workers. Now, jump ahead 1 year later, and our entire economy collapses. The Panic of 1893 becomes one of the worst economic depressions in American history. The causes of it, well, includes declining gold reserves, railroad bankruptcies, foreign investors pulling their money out of the United States. That's not good. The effects are severe. Unemployment goes up dramatically. Thousands of banks and businesses fail, and both workers and farmers suffer. President Grover Cleveland responds by defending the gold standard and refusing large-scale federal relief. To many Americans, especially the populists, this confirmed their belief that government is protecting banks and corporations rather than the ordinary people. Events like Coxey's Army, where unemployed workers marched on Washington demanding jobs, showed how desperate the situation has become. That jumps us into the election of 1896, which will be the climax of the populist movement. And instead of running their own candidate, many populists throw their support behind William Jennings Bryan, the Democratic nominee. Bryan embraces populist ideas, including free silver, a graduated income tax, and a tax on the trust in railroads. He gives a famous Cross of Gold speech. You need to know that. And in that speech, he argues that the gold standard is crushing the working Americans. He runs an energetic campaign, traveling across the country and appealing to farmers and laborers everywhere. Now, his opponent, William McKinley, well, he represented stability to Americans. He supported the gold standard. He was backed by business leaders, and he runs a highly organized, well-funded campaign. And many urban and middle-class voters feared that the free silver movement would devalue wages and destabilize the economy. So McKinley wins this election decisively. The election of 1896 effectively ends the populist movement as a national political force. After McKinley's victory, the gold standard is secured. The economy does begin to recover and the populists lose momentum. But this is the key takeaway. Populism failed as a political party, but succeeds as an idea. Many populist demands later become law, including a graduated income tax, the direct election of senators, and a greater government regulation of business. Those reforms do not happen, though, in the 1890s. They happen later in what's known as the Progressive Era, which is in the early 20th century. The 1890s force Americans to confront a new reality. Industrial capitalism has created wealth, but also inequality. The populists ask the questions. The progressives will try to answer them. So as the 1890s come to a close, the Populist Party fades from the political scene, but the questions it raised remained unresolved. Americans are left asking how much responsibility the government should take for the economic fairness, worker protection, and growing power of big business. Those questions aren't going to disappear. They are going to shape the next era of American history. And in the next phase of our studies, we'll see how reformers and political leaders respond to these challenges during the Progressive Era. All right, thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.